Hey, it's Vanessa Love. All right, well, I hope you guys feel fairly comfortable contacting me because I have been contacted by some of you, and you can tell like in some of the comments and stuff that I do respond, I do listen. Um, I am busy sometimes, but I don't feel like you all are asking for too much. So I can get back to some of you about. I can get back to most of you about what's going on. Um, all right, so got an email, and it was about if I knew that this one art therapy program, if it was a reputable, good program. And the thing is that not many other people are talking about actual art therapy. They will talk about like what they do with their clients, which is perfectly fine, but they won't actually talk about the ins and outs. And so I don't know. I don't know, other than the couple of things I know about the schools around here, and like who I know in other cities, whether I respect them or whether we have our disagreements. So I don't actually know. So it got me thinking about, well, how do you determine whether or not a school of art therapy is the right one for you? And I think it's threefold, and I also want to talk a little bit about my experience before I got to grad school. So, three things that you should probably ask any, grad school is, um, what is a typical day like for an art therapist? So now story time. So I had to do this project for my writing class as a like junior or something in college, and I had already determined I was going to be an art therapist. So I contacted a couple of art therapists, and I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I'll talk about that. So that was about 13 years ago, right? Well, junior year, so about 11 or 12 years ago. Um, so, um, so I contacted some art therapists, and I love Lucia Capione. It breaks my heart that she was such an asshole, um, over the over the phone. I admired her, like, oh my god, when I had the chance to talk to her about this project, I was so excited. She has not practiced art therapy at that time for 20 years. She told me about her typical day, and her typical day was about doing, at that point, she had written another book, so I think that was like her fourth or fifth book, and she was touring around. So, can't really get what the art therapy field is like if you haven't been practicing for 20 years. And then she, I guess she treated me as if I was a colleague and said, if you ever need help creating an art therapy business, I do have a $200, class that you can take so that you can learn the art therapy business. But also, if you're not practicing, then I don't know how you would necessarily know how the art therapy business runs. You know how to write books. That's awesome. But again, college student, barely making ends meet, probably had been in like a job or two at that point in my life. Nothing sustainable, nothing that I had $200, disposable income, um, to my name. I mean, oh gosh, those are some of those days where it's like, well, I know I paid for groceries somehow. Um, boy. So, um, so no, I didn't have $200 to go for that. Next person, I've met this person after this. She owns a retreat center in San Diego County, and it sounded so awesome. Oh my God, was so excited to talk with her. She was a bitch. Oh my God. And she was a bitch in person too. Oh my God. all I needed to know was, what's a typical day like for you? And she was like, well, you can check out my website. Oh, and by the way, if you ever want to actually like come and like witness a workshop, pay $200. Do you get the theme here? Pay $200 and you can like come and we can like, you can just like be a part of this like weekend workshop that I do. She was also the therapist that walked up to the artist while we were at Open Studios and said, do you ever have suicidal thoughts? Not your patient, not a private conversation, not a therapy session, not appropriate to ask anyone after you see their artwork, and clearly you missed the, the actual artwork of Terry Flowers. I love his work. I think he's amazing and wonderful, and like, oh my god, I want to aspire to that. He's also fairly realistic, and luckily he took that comment and was like, well, I'm alive and breathing. But still one of those, like, she couldn't tell me anything about her day, and she wanted $200. Next person I went to, what's a typical day like for you? He told me about the recent weekend retreat where they went into the woods and like found like pieces of nature to make into a mask. It didn't make enough sense to me to include that in my paper. I actually at that point had to find another, I had to find a therapist to talk to, and luckily Harry Pinkenhorn was able to help me out, and I was able to finish my paper for class. So art therapists aren't good at explaining what they do, and if they can't explain to you what they are doing, don't go to that college. Oh my god, don't go to that college. Don't give them your money, because clearly they do want your money. And I think if, anyone says something like, oh, you'll learn that in the program. No. Why can't you tell me that now, before I have to pay you tuition? Because this should be a fairly straightforward question. If people aren't willing to answer this, something is wrong. And, and I'm saying this from experience. Me, as an art therapist, I can tell you my typical day includes coming to the office I usually like to be here an hour before my clients get here. And then I'll have a client, we'll either talk or make artwork. If they choose to make artwork, they have the choice of choosing their own direction or getting direction from me. And that could be, hey, you talked about this thing, so maybe you want to, like if they're talking about depression, maybe you want to draw a picture about your depression. Fairly simple, straightforward. I usually clean up because I know that some people haven't, if they're painting, right? I know that some people don't always know how to properly clean brushes. I do, so I don't mind, doing it just kind of on my own. Usually we also run out of time, so I'm trying to get them out the door before my next client comes in, and I might have, some stuff around my sink that that needs to be cleaned. And that's fairly typical day. I usually work between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. is the last session that I usually take. That's about it. So you can imagine that, if people can't simply tell you what they do, and if you want to know what I did in the hospital, typical day, I worked 12 to 9 there. I had 3 to 4 groups usually. Sometimes I did assessments, which was like, what's your typical day like? No, what are your stressors? How long has it been going on? What are your parents like? Groups were I would work with the kids, the adolescents, or the adults. If I was working at 9 o'clock, I probably did 2 relaxation groups, one with the kids and one with the adults. And that could include anything from doing an art activity or turning out the lights and reading a book or listening to soothing music so that they could kind of get the idea of like how to meditate, or the many options of meditation. And then we'd have a discussion, and then I'd have to write notes about whether or not people attended, what they said, and if they were active participants. And for like relaxation group, if they were there, and like, if they couldn't give me any like information, then I could still be like, well, they were actively participated. If they could give me some information, like, that was very helpful, gave insight about activity, that type of stuff. So if you do it enough, you know how to respond to people who ask. All right, second question. How many people go into an art therapy job after graduation? I think I want to say there were 70 people who graduated in my class. It's probably a 50-50. Some people are working at Starbucks or working as a mail person, what is that, or mail carrier, mail person, sorry, it sounded funny. Mail carrier, or they're like, one of my friends before getting a job in like a facility, she was helping a doctor out with his like old files, and making sure that everything was arranged properly in those old files. Yeah, so I'm like trying to think. One person completely left and did real estate. One person completely left and did a vintage shop, which is kind of cool. But she had been an art teacher. She wanted to be an art therapist. I don't know what happened in between art therapy grad school and she's doing vintage, this vintage shop, but something happened. I'm not privy to that, so I don't know. So yeah, like, but there's a couple of friends who have jobs in facilities that, art therapists, as their title. Some people are like, what have my roles been? Residential assistant, rehab assistant, rehab therapist, rehab assistants. They're recreation assistant. That's right. And like a couple of other ones. So, and then one of my friends just opened up her own practice after, we graduated at the same time 6 years ago. So, like, awesome for her. But there was a time where she really struggled, and either she was working at a facility or she was a stay-at-home mom. So, like, it's important to know what happens after graduation, because that's really what you're focusing on. You want to be able to go to school and then go on to do something else. And if you're so the third thing is, if you're interested in private practice, do they teach you the business end of private practice? The college that I attended, absolutely not. There is no weekend workshop. There is no, hey, we're going to do an 8-week special, 4-week special, on the paperwork that you need, the, like how to deal with insurances, how to sell yourself, how to market yourself, those type of things. I had to find out all of those things from the guy who did my supervision, who hired me as a contract worker at his private practice. And I paid a higher percentage of what I took in, because basically I was paying him to use his license, and I was paying him for his knowledge about about the therapy field, so that I could be a better therapist. Now, to be clear, me and this guy did not always get along. However, I always knew that he was going to be fair, because he was a stickler for his contract. And I think that that's a great way to deal with someone with this kind of thing, because a lot of people, they want to be very nice, and they want to just offer their services to everyone for just any amount of cost. And I strongly advise, do not do that. Oh my God, do not do that. You are selling yourself short, and you are really, really you're not going to pay your bills, but also, like, you're not getting what you're worth. And after you go through a program that is supposed to be like solid on your knowledge about art therapy, you should not be selling yourself short. $20 or $40 or, even $50 sometimes for a session is not enough. Especially, and I've learned this the very, very hard way, especially for people who have money who can afford that. Now, if you have someone and eventually like their finances change and they are really struggling, perfectly fine to be like, hey, this week, I know you're really struggling. $20 is fine. Because they have an established relationship with you. I do not advise that at all. Like, stick to your guns here. The moment that you start, like, really, really, like, offering, like, being too empathetic to people will take advantage of that shit. And I've had to send people who have money, to collections because they did not respect what I do. They did not respect the contract that they had with me. And the lower that they paid, the more they disrespected me. So that's why I'm coming from that way. However, I do know that some people still advise doing this. I say be very, very careful. If you have a bunch of people who are paying $165 for your services, then maybe occasionally have 1 or 2 slots open for someone who is very, very motivated but does not have a lot of money, because that is very different from people who have money and just don't want to pay that much for therapy. Okay? So let's get that clear. So I'm hoping that by the time that you guys see this and you're like, okay, this is how I can assess a place, that you will be on your way to having a really good experience in grad school, and that you will know definitely how to sell yourself, because I mean, as I've said, that first year in practice, it was tough. It was something else. It was a whole other crash course in marketing and insurances and paperwork that I never knew. And on top of that, when people teach you ethics, make sure that you read the laws, because I didn't know some of the things that people had had taught me, but I really do now know exactly what the laws are and what's expected of me. Yeah, it's a very interesting place to be. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Again, please feel free to contact me, and I am glad to answer some of your questions. All right, thanks so much.